Glenwood Heights was the kind of suburban paradise where every driveway gleamed and every lawn seemed to have been cut with surgical precision. It wasn't just the product of diligent homeowners, it was the legacy of a woman who wielded the HOA charter like a divine commandment. Karen Whitmore. Her name carried a mixture of fear and exasperation throughout the cul-de-sacs and winding boulevards of the neighborhood. With her signature lemon-yellow clipboard and icy stare, Karen had ruled Glenwood Heights for nearly a decade. She was both queen and warden, and nothing escaped her notice. Not an overgrown hedge, not a mismatched paint job, not even the color of garden gnomes. I moved into Glenwood 3 years ago. My name is Sam Collins. I'm an aerospace systems engineer, and though I worked under contract for a private firm, most of my projects ran through partnerships with NASA. I wasn't here for the country club lifestyle. I wanted quiet, stable ground to work on a passion project I'd been developing for years, a satellite dish tuned to receive telemetry from deep space objects. The dish sat in my backyard, tucked discreetly behind a privacy fence, angled toward the sky like a solemn sentinel. To most, it looked like a high-end TV rig. But its true purpose was far more critical. I'd been selected as one of several civilian participants in a NASA-led initiative called Project EchoFall, monitoring signals from a rogue exoplanet that exhibited unusual magnetic pulses. That dish wasn't just metal and wires. It was a bridge between Earth and something vast and unknowable. Until Karen decided it had to go. It started with a note, slipped under my door. Notice of noncompliance. Structure in rear yard violates HOA Regulation 3.8b. No unauthorized exterior equipment. Please remove within 7 days to avoid fines. I chuckled at first. Surely a misunderstanding. I emailed the HOA, attaching city zoning clearance and NASA's authorization forms. I even invited Karen to visit, to see it wasn't some unsightly monstrosity, but a professionally calibrated, municipally approved installation. She declined. Instead, I received a second letter, then a third, each more aggressively worded, each closing with, "Failure to comply may result in penalties, liens, or forced removal." The forced part got my attention. I attended the next HOA meeting, hoping to appeal. Karen presided from the front of the clubhouse, flanked by 3 board members who nodded before she even finished sentences. I stood, laid out my case calmly. Scientific value, legal permits, national interest. She interrupted midway. "You're turning a family neighborhood into a tech facility, Mr. Collins," she said, tapping her clipboard with venomous certainty. "This isn't Silicon Valley. Glenwood Heights values uniformity, order. NASA values information. And that dish is one of 6 in the world capturing this signal," I replied, matching her tone. She smiled, but not the warm kind. The kind that said, "I'm going to win." A week later, I came home to find yellow tape around my backyard. The dish was gone. Not disassembled with care, ripped from its concrete foundation, control panel in pieces, coax cables snapped like dry twigs. I stood in stunned silence. My breath caught in my throat. Ring camera footage from a neighbor filled in the blanks. Karen had hired a private contractor. She stood arms crossed, watching them dismantle the dish with bolt cutters and crowbars. She even applauded as the reflector toppled over. She hadn't just removed an unauthorized structure. She had torn down years of work, violated federal agreements, and destroyed scientific hardware. I felt rage, but more than that, disbelief. Not just at the act itself, but at the audacity. Karen had crossed a line no clipboard could justify. That night, I filed a report with the city. Then I called NASA. They called back within the hour. What had started as a petty HOA squabble had just escalated into a federal issue. And Karen had no idea what storm was coming. The morning after the dish was destroyed, my phone rang before sunrise. A voice I knew well, sharp and quick, Dr. Eliza Banner, NASA's civilian telemetry lead.
"Sam,
your station's offline. What happened?" I told her everything. Silence on the other end. Then, "You're saying someone physically removed it?" "Destroyed it," I corrected. "Wires, mount, control base gone." "We lost signal from Echo Fall the same hour," she said, voice hardening. "That dish was the only node aimed at the right vector. Do you have backups?" I rubbed my eyes. "None that matter." Dr. Banner exhaled slowly. "You need to send us photos. We're escalating this to legal and ops. You may have lost us a key anomaly." By noon, a dark government SUV pulled into my driveway. Two men in suits stepped out, flanking a younger woman in a NASA windbreaker. They introduced themselves without names and inspected the backyard with clinical efficiency. One documented the damage with a DSLR. Another picked through broken components like an archaeologist at a dig site. The woman turned to me. "We're filing formal charges of interference with a federally partnered research asset." "Against Karen Whitmore?" I asked. "Against the HOA. But she's on record authorizing the removal." The gravity of the situation began to sink in. This wasn't a civil matter anymore. Karen had trespassed into territory far beyond homeowner preferences and grass height regulations. Meanwhile, I worked on recovering what I could. The dish had an onboard solid-state buffer. If I could salvage it, maybe I'd at least preserve the last few hours of data. By midnight, I had something. A raw feed. Fragmented. Incomplete. But amid the static and telemetry spikes was a strange burst, unlike anything Echo Fall had emitted before. It wasn't just electromagnetic noise. It was structured. Binary clusters. Harmonic patterns. Geometric harmonics. I sent the packet to NASA. A few hours later, Dr. Banner called again. "Sam, this isn't natural." "You mean alien?" "We're not saying that," she said, a little too quickly. "But something intelligent created this structure." Karen had destroyed the only antenna that captured it. She had unknowingly silenced what could have been humanity's first whisper from the stars. That week, headlines began to spread. An anonymous tip, likely from someone inside NASA, reached the press. HOA destroys NASA equipment linked to exoplanet signal. Karen called it fake news. Claimed I fabricated it all to stir up drama. On Nextdoor, she posted, "This is a quiet neighborhood, not an alien-finding playground." But the court summons was real. NASA's legal team moved fast. The HOA was served. Karen was named. Still, she didn't back down. She doubled down. Held a town hall. Called me a menace. Said I was abusing city zoning. Suggested I was a fraud. But people were starting to doubt her. Especially after Channel 8 News ran a story showing the dish's mangled remains and Karen, on video, giving the removal order with a smug grin. Neighbors who once feared her began to ask questions. Some even apologized to me. I rebuilt a temporary dish, smaller, more fragile, but with NASA's guidance, I got it online within a few days. No signal. Nothing from Echo Fall. The moment had passed. Until one night, 2 weeks after the destruction, the console beeped. Not telemetry. A transmission. Faint. Buried in static. But unmistakable. It was repeating. Structured. Message-like. I froze. Recorded it. Isolated the signal. Ran filters. It wasn't from Earth. Whatever Echo Fall was, it had noticed us. And Karen Whitmore had almost silenced its reply forever. NASA responded within minutes of my update. Not an email, an encrypted call. "We're rerouting a high-gain array to verify your signal," Dr. Banner said. "Can you keep the transmission stable?" I stared at the blinking console. "It's faint, but I'll hold it." For the next 48 hours, I barely slept. I monitored the feed in real time, tracking each pattern, each frequency modulation. The message repeated in waves, structured noise, followed by long pauses, then modulation shifts. By the third day, NASA confirmed it. The transmission matched no known celestial bodies, no spacecraft, no solar interference. This was real. Karen, meanwhile, was unraveling. News crews were now a fixture on her perfectly manicured front lawn. She refused interviews, but issued statements claiming I was orchestrating a federal stunt to avoid HOA compliance. It only got worse when federal agents served her a subpoena. Public opinion flipped fast. Comment threads mocked her. Neighbors began discussing her resignation openly. Even board members started distancing themselves. One, Martin Lewis, approached me quietly at dusk. "I'm sorry, Sam," he said, eyes weary. "She pushed too far." I nodded. "She destroyed more than hardware. She destroyed opportunity." "Then take it back," he said. "Whatever that signal is, you found it again." I worked with NASA remotely to rebuild a stronger dish. They flew in a team. My backyard became a temporary operations center, shielded and encrypted. We were no longer just listening, we were trying to respond. On the fourth night, we sent a pulse back. Encoded with prime numbers, Fibonacci sequences, and a short pictorial array showing Earth's position relative to the Sun. Silence followed. For hours. Then a new signal. Shorter. Sharper. Different structure. It wasn't a response. It was an acknowledgement. NASA initiated full protocol escalation. Project Echofall was now front-page news. Karen's role in nearly derailing it became a public scandal. Facing federal charges, civil lawsuits, and near-universal condemnation, Karen resigned as HOA president. Her signature yellow clipboard was reportedly tossed into a recycling bin by a neighbor. But the story didn't end there. A congressional hearing was scheduled. NASA called me to testify. The question was no longer whether we were alone. It was, what had we just told them? And what would they say next? The media frenzy hadn't slowed. If anything, it had shifted, morphing from scandal to spectacle. What began as a neighborhood power trip had evolved into a moment that captivated the world. The phrase, HOA Karen destroys NASA link to alien contact, was now emblazoned across news tickers and podcasts. I had become a reluctant spokesperson for the mission, part scientist, part suburban martyr. And yet, the real story was happening behind the noise. The signal had returned. NASA had routed global satellite resources to confirm and decode the burst transmissions. The patterns were no longer just anomalies. They were precise, mathematical, beautiful in their order. This was not natural interference. It was crafted. And now it was repeating again. 3 pulses. Pause. 7 pulses. Pause. 1. 3. 13. Fibonacci. Prime numbers. Then silence. Then the whole sequence started again. A message wrapped in the universal language of mathematics. My backyard was no longer mine. It had transformed into a secured facility enclosed by mobile perimeter fencing, white tents, and satellite uplinks. My neighbors watched from behind blinds and lawn chairs as NASA engineers passed through Glenwood like a quiet parade of purpose. Karen's house remained dark. For weeks, she had avoided the press, retreated from public view. But her name lived on, forever tied to this moment. Every article, every report, every late-night show monologue tagged her name with a mix of ridicule and infamy. She had become a cautionary tale. But I wasn't interested in her anymore. There were bigger questions now. NASA, along with an emergency summit of astrophysicists and linguists, began the next step, interpreting the message. At first, it seemed one-sided. We received. We listened. We documented. Then we responded. Short pulses. Our own prime sequences. Images encoded in frequency shifts. Pictographic arrays of our solar system. Human anatomy. A basic binary language for yes and no. Days passed. Then the reply came. Faster. Sharper. Different format. We were being mimicked. They had learned our pattern. This wasn't just a broadcast. It was a conversation. But what were we saying? What were we asking? And what were they choosing to answer? On the 10th day, the signal shifted again. One of the linguists, Dr. Yael Moreno, was the first to recognize it. This isn't just data. It's recursive. They're using our syntax against us. It's adaptive. Meaning they were learning, not just listening. Learning. The weight of it settled on the team like a cloud. We had reached out in the dark. Something reached back. And now it was climbing toward us, clawing its way into our frame of understanding. Then came the final burst. This one was different. An image. Encoded. Crude at first, but unmistakable once filtered. A grid of light. An arc. A sphere. Patterns etched across its surface. A planet. It wasn't ours. Echofall. The system we had named. The object we had tracked. It had sent us its portrait. And more. Nested in the image was a sequence, timestamps, coordinates, orbital trajectories. It was coming closer. Not toward Earth, but toward visibility. An approach vector. NASA went into overdrive. An emergency meeting at the UN. A confidential advisory issued to global observatories. Eyes were pointed toward the black. But amid all this, something strange happened. I received a letter. Handwritten. No return address. I recognized the cursive. Karen. Mr. Collins, you may believe I'm your enemy. I assure you I never understood what I destroyed. Pride blinded me. Authority corrupted me. But I see now what this was, what you were trying to do. I cannot undo what's done. But I will no longer stand in its way. Good luck. Karen W. I stared at the letter for a long time. It didn't make things right, but it meant something. Karen vanished from Glenwood shortly after. Moved out quietly. Some said she changed her name. Others claimed she had a nervous breakdown. I didn't follow her story. My eyes were focused elsewhere. Weeks passed. The transmissions continued. Then, silence. Complete. The kind of silence that comes not from absence, but from anticipation. We waited. Hours. Days. Then came the final broadcast. An image. Clearer than any before. Not echofall. Not space. A landscape. Towering structures. Geometric shapes. A horizon that curved upward slightly. It was a view. From the surface. They were showing us their world. And beside that landscape, something else appeared. Text. Our text. Rough. Blocky. But unmistakable. 2 words. Send reply.